Have you ever met someone surprisingly similar to you, yet fundamentally different? Welcome to the exploration of quasi-identical types, a very interesting and nuanced relationship within the realm of socionics, one of the best for a deep understanding of this field in general. For those who might have stumbled upon this video by chance, socionics is one of the more refined frameworks that tries to bring structure and clarity to the phenomena behind psychology. It's a practical tool. It enables individuals to make more optimal decisions, particularly in areas of personal happiness, professional fulfillment, interpersonal relationships, and others. Quasi-identical types are fascinating because they share a multitude of similarities, often including interests and roles within teams, yet diverge significantly. Nevertheless, this relationship is very good for self-growth, business. The integral type of this relationship is LII, the entrepreneur, and it's the easiest path to embracing an anti-quadra's distinct worldview and enriching perspectives. To start exploring the differences between these types, we need to begin with something very simple. Many points will overlap and interconnect with each other, and it would be good to try to capture these integral images of each type right away. Memory, an essential point from which many others derive. The memory of an LII is like a library with many books, but these books describe mostly just general concepts without much details. Details are present only in those directly related to the person's ongoing focus of doing. In order to remember information for them for a long time, they need to capture it in the form of static images, records. Otherwise, it immediately flies out of their mind. Similarly, with visual memory, with the ability to hold visual situations, with memory for nuances, for the coloring of personal events and past events in general. In all of these, they usually perform poorly. Now, for the ILI, they are entirely different. Here, the analogy is a voluminous tree of associations. Things pop into their mind upon the emergence of associations automatically. They remember in big interconnected chunks with important details and specifics. Even without direct logical connections between them, they remember lots of data not related to the current situation. They have a very dynamic, complex picture in memory, and if we understand memory in general terms as capacity and the ability to use it, we can say ILI excels in it. Okay, here's at the bottom some correlations with dichotomies. Dichotomies in socionics are simply a more compact way of conveying information. For example, what is constructivism? It means that Fi or Fe of this type is its strongest or weakest function. We can also say that this type has inert ethics. Thinking. Let's first briefly talk about process-result dichotomy. Simply put, it correlates with the length of thought chains. More process means longer chains. So thinking is more sequential, complexifying, thorough, refined, but slow and prone to tunnel vision. While more result means more breaks of these thought chains, it's simplifying, fast, with a good generalized overview, but which can lead to excessive compression of information and can overlook important details. Now, considering all this, let's see how each type thinks in terms of viewing the present. Starting with ILI. They look at how things were in the past and what led to the current state. From individual details, they gradually build a general picture, not rushing to conclusions or decisions. They focus on shortcomings and potential problems. When seeing a new situation, they grasp the context it's in, the scenario it's unfolding within, and live through it. They pay more attention to transitional options and event probabilities rather than clear and unequivocal conclusions. For them, the future often appears troubling, indifferent, because they remember all the mistakes that were made. Hence the name critic. Such thinking type with very strong introverted intuition makes them good forecasters. Now for LII. They look at what desired result they want in the future and how to project it onto the present. They dislike small details, preferring to generalize. A big picture, their thinking constantly shifts focus, switching between different layers of a complex object, dissecting it, and then stacking to see the whole volume. Like assembling a kaleidoscope, it layers and shifts perspective, looking from one angle, then another, and back again, constantly changing viewpoints. From the outside, it seems to skip details and lack depth or understanding, but actually, it grasps the essence very well by filtering out minutiae and linking diverse insights. Mood and temperament. Both types have a predominance of the negativism pole. Inert questimity. In ILI, it's like a constant dispute, yin and yang. In LII, it's switching perspective and scale. So they often consider an alternative, either actively interact with it or accept it. Look from the opposite side. But an important point, Socion is not symmetrical. Different dichotomies manifest differently in different types and are different in strength. Not all extroverts will be equally extroverted. For example, LSE is not as extroverted as other extroverts. They are more distant. And some introverts are more contact. The same goes for negativism. And this pole is most pronounced of all the Socion and ILI, along with constructivism, which is reflected in many traits, including mood. LII has a stable neutral mood. ILI's mood is variable and sometimes depressive. They are also not very attracted to excessively good moods of others. They are prone to prolonged periods of bad, melancholic depressive mood with indifferent apathy, sadness. Just a side note, their mirror type, entrepreneur, LIE, is quite the opposite in this regard. They are naturally called optimists. Worldview and management. LII views the world from a more idealistic stance. They often think more about humanity and the world at large, more priority to group goals over personal ambitions, obliging to requests, also underestimate the self-interest of others. Often overlook the factor of competition, generally find the atmosphere of tense, competitive labor unpleasant, as well as an environment of mutual mocking. Essentially, this also shapes the type of people they get along with. Also, considering that they are very bad at power pressure, force, we can see what will be most likely their management style. Of course, both types are not really managers in the grand scheme, but if LIs have to manage, they can do so in a decentralized style with a small group. Horizontal management through rewards, with high autonomy. They are very autonomous themselves. It's the type that values this the most in the entire Socion. This type cannot tolerate pressure on themselves from the collective general opinion. For them, it is very important to maintain a sense of their independence. Though ILI also values personal space a lot. Now ILI. This is the most pragmatic type. They easily say no to requests. Their interest often is primarily personal. They are always prepared for potential betrayal. Thus, their worldview is closer to realism, even cynicism to some extent. They better feel the dynamics of power, competition. They do not aim to be leaders, but again, if necessary, they can manage. And here they are better at centralized management with large groups, with possible increasing centralization and strictness over time. ILI gets along with power types, enforcers. They prefer steady emotions in their surroundings, avoiding bursts, even disliking excessive displays of joy, finding overt expressions of joy irritating or alienating. Emotions greatly drain them. By the way, ELI usually keeps away from the power force types because they are not good at resisting aggression. LII exhibits a thirst for knowledge, for uncovering universal truths. They value intellectual pursuits and are motivated by curiosity. ILI may exhibit a more utilitarian approach to information, focusing on specifics. They are less likely to seek knowledge for its own sake and more for its practical applications. Ethics and behavior framework. LII, a polite type, very principled, treats all people, both acquaintances and strangers, equally, without any privileges, on equal terms, without insults, aimed at polite communication, without rudeness and coercion, can perform well in a formal setting, even in public speech, with practice. The concept of fairness is very important for this type. Also, they often find it very difficult to change their behavior to adapt, for example, to an unfair boss. The ILI in this regard is more pragmatic and flexible, although the ethical and relational factor is often not considered, which may have a negative effect. They can adapt more easily and, for example, support a conversation, but then just leave without worrying about the rules of good manners. They communicate better in an informal setting, have a more critical view of social norms and behavior. They also often have problems in the field of empathy. On the other hand, it's also harder to hurt them with a careless word. They are much closer to the expression, "not my business, not my problem." Also, I want to add that generally, all things related to ethics, not only introverted but also extroverted, develop better in LII. For example, emotionality, although often weak by nature, it can be well trained in them. Similarly, ILI can do better with sensory. Although their emotionality is low and they are easily depleted by its excess, manual skills such as minor repairs, on the other hand, tend to develop better. LII generally seeks stability, order, and harmony, reacting negatively to conflict, injustice, and dishonesty. They are sensitive to disruptions in moral and ethical norms. ILI demonstrates adaptability and resilience with a pragmatic acceptance of the world's complexities, including its darker aspects. They may find certain challenges stimulating rather than distressing. There is also a separate interesting model that tries to describe the holistic images of types in 4 key words, presented by Viktor Gulenko. It seemed to me that it's quite useful and accurate for compact type representations. However, I believe that to understand it correctly, it would be very beneficial to expand and clarify keywords, considering practical experience for a more accurate understanding. Schematic. LII views the world through a complex set of schemes, considering the situation from different angles, analyzing, organizing, categorizing knowledge, and the structure of the world. Planning. LII does not typically dwell on their plans for tomorrow, and time is not viewed as the most crucial resource. However, preparation, predictability, and risk aversion are important, and having both a plan A and plan B, then they accurately calculate the time expenditures. But who typically builds long-term plans for the future, plans and outlines their life far ahead? It is LIE. Autonomy. As we've discussed, achieving autonomy is important for them, a position in the group where they depend on few and don't have to fight for their territory or rights. Displacement. The last keyword, which carries a somewhat negative connotation for types, in the sense that as a result of their avoidance and distancing position, LII gradually gets pushed to the deep periphery, where they are left alone and can engage in their favorite activity, but their influence on events becomes minimal. Thus, they have problems with how to benefit, how to sell your ideas, how to promote, how to organize, how to break through. Now, ILI, forecast. That is, the accurate calculation of the consequences of decisions considering all available information on the subject, the sense of when to start and when to stop activity. Memory, the perception of impending changes, even in the details, and as they emerge, capturing where everything is heading due to the good retrieval from memory of similar scenario events. Optimization, here it's not the optimization of a specific system, that would be the domain of LII. That is, LII chooses a system and works on improving it. And, for example, LII, the dominant subtype, who focuses even more on maximizing the output of that system to make it work, is called improving subtype. For ILI, the system itself isn't important, but predicting which system will be useful is. For them, solving the problem is what matters most. Anticipating the situation and understanding its development, they try to apply one of their logical solutions that fits the situation. So optimization here should be understood as making optimal decisions, which will require the minimum effort and yield maximum return. That is, a constant involuntary weighing and estimating the efficiency of one's expenses and efforts and contemplating their optimization. Lastly, skepticism. As we found out, ILI suffers from excessive skepticism and cynicism, which can spoil their relationships with people and lead them to gloomy or depressive states, from which one can only exit through a shake-up. This concludes our first presentation. We attempted to examine the most pronounced differences between LII and ILI, which are quite apparent and resonate across many models. I hope this was useful and you've learned something new for yourself, and the differences between these two types will now be more noticeable to you. See you soon.